People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, Rishi Sunak is on the verge of a Brexit breakthrough. Ignore the naysayers. If he gets a good deal across the line this week, it will be a turning point for his premiership. Boris got Brexit done. Rishi can make Brexit work. My Mark Meets guest is one of the longest-serving MPs in Parliament, and he's the godfather of Brexit. Sir Bill Cash, live in the studio. We'll discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU and Boris Johnson. In the big question, was Nicola Sturgeon good for Scotland or bad? And what will her departure mean for the next general election? And in the news agenda with my panel, should Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on tax rises? And are the public sick of woke corporations? Lots to get through, but my big opinion's next. First, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Lancashire police are working to identify a body that was recovered from the River Wyre. It was located in the area where mother of two, Nicola Bulley, disappeared more than 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest development. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the news as heartbreaking and distressing. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville says the post-mortem examination might not give us information about what happened.
There'll be a formal identification. The body's obviously, if it is Nicola, has been in the river a long, nearly 3 weeks, or best more than 3 weeks. So whether the post-mortem can ever tell us whether she entered deliberately or by accident, perhaps we'll never know. There's been too much speculation in this case, of course. We've had all sorts of ghouls going down there and causing even more hurt for the family. So the sooner the police can get the post-mortem and the identification done, I'm sure they'll be keen to get that information out there.
A cabinet minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful because there's still plenty of work to be done. Mr Johnson's warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake, and that comes a day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission president said they made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The protocol bill introduced under Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and Leader of the House of Commons Penny Mordaunt believes that gives the government a stronger bargaining position.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. And the musical programme for the King's coronation has been revealed. An anthem written by composer Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of 12 new pieces to be played during the ceremony. Best known for musicals, including The Phantom of the Opera and Jesus Christ Superstar, he said he's incredibly honoured to have been asked. Greek Orthodox music will also be on that playlist, a personal request by King Charles as a tribute to his late father. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. You're with GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Tatiana Sanchez, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, in just a moment, Rishi Sunak is on the verge of a Brexit breakthrough. Ignore the naysayers. If he gets a good deal across the line this week, it will be a turning point for his premiership. Boris got Brexit done. Rishi can make Brexit work. In the big question, was Nicola Sturgeon good for Scotland? And what will her departure mean for the next general election? Does it give Labour an opportunity? My Mark Meets guest is one of the longest-serving MPs in Parliament and the godfather of Brexit, Sir Bill Cash, live in the studio discussing the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU and Boris Johnson. In my take at 10, Prince Andrew is likely to be turfed out of his £30 million Royal Lodge, with King Charles tightening the purse strings. Good news, it's time the pompous prince paid his own way. We've got tomorrow morning's papers. That's tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. And in the news agenda, should Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on tax rises? And are the public sick of woke corporations? Reacting to those stories and many more are my all-star panel of award-winning playwright and political commentator Emma Burnell, best-selling author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, and top political commentator and a brand new star on Mark Dolan Tonight, Reem Ibrahim. We'll also bring you up to speed if there are any more developments in the ongoing Nicola Bulley case. A very tragic situation. A body has been found, as, of course, Tatiana has mentioned in the bulletin. We will keep you up to date on any developments in that story. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show, mark@gbnews.uk. The best bit of the show is when you get in touch. And I read out your emails uncensored and unedited. Sometimes they can be quite spicy, which is how I like them. It's a spicy 2 hours, folks. Big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Brexit is like Beethoven's 10th Symphony. Great, but unfinished. Which takes me to Northern Ireland and a policy mechanism, the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, which plonks a border down the middle of our country via the Irish Sea. It was never fit for purpose, but it was the concession which got a free trade deal with the European Union across the line. I suspect the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson accepted the deal, knowing it would be dead on arrival and knowing it would have to be renegotiated. And here we are, with our new Prime Minister on the verge of a Brexit breakthrough. Yes, indeed, Brussels said they would never budge on this, but they are now about to do exactly that. There are Eurosceptic Tory MPs who are already talking down this deal. But Brexiteers must not fall into the trap of ideological purity at the expense of Britain's national interest. And what is our national interest? Well, it's to end this dreadful political and diplomatic deadlock, to give the people of Northern Ireland a functioning government in Stormont, and to agree a satisfactory, future-proof deal so we can all get on with our bloody lives. Do you want to still be talking about this in 10 years' time? I don't. Now, Boris Johnson has said that it would be a mistake for Rishi Sunak to get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which is currently in the House of Lords, and is a bill that would effectively tear up the protocol, which is a legally protected promise that we made to the EU. Now, this legislation has been politically very useful, as it has sent a clear message to Brussels that they either renegotiate the protocol or it goes. Brilliant. I love it. But for Johnson to say that no agreement with the EU and the diplomatic, political and trade war that would ensue is better than a negotiated agreement is reckless, wrong and unhelpful. But we would expect nothing less from the blonde bombshell. Boris Johnson is a military-grade shit disturber and loses no sleep in making life hard for Rishi Sunak on the eve of what could be a groundbreaking achievement. Boris has his talents, but it's my view that he is dishonest at a cellular level, and his only motivation, his only priority has ever been Boris Johnson. In the end, my prediction is that a renegotiated protocol, the manifestation of a compromise on both sides, and one just good enough to satisfy unionist communities and most Tory backbenchers, will succeed. It won't be incredible, but don't let the great be the enemy of the good. Don't fall into the trap of ideological purity. It's counterproductive and ultimately hurts the Brexit cause. If the DUP accept the deal, that's good enough for me. That is my red line. Sorting out this protocol wasn't even on Rishi Sunak's top 5 list of priorities. And yet, resolving it will be his first political triumph, demonstrating statecraft, negotiating prowess and sheer determination. If he gets this Brexit breakthrough, it will boost his personal standing and will, in my view, change the narrative of this government from one seen as a failing administration, sleepwalking to electoral disaster, to a government that wins arguments, fixes problems and gets things done. The protocol was never acceptable, and it's time for us to be one country again. I'm hopeful that's what the Prime Minister will achieve this week. Let's see. To his credit, Boris Johnson got Brexit done. If Prime Minister Rishi Sunak can make Brexit work and achieve progress on his other priorities, particularly the economy, the NHS and stopping the boats, he'll be laughing all the way to the next election. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your thoughts shortly, but let's get the reaction of my all-star panel tonight. Playwright and political commentator Emma Burnell, best-selling author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, and top political commentator Reem Ibrahim. Reem, let's start with you. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, your first appearance on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you. Look, I think a deal is in the offing. It represents compromise on both sides, and if the DUP are happy, so am I.
I actually want to echo what you've just said, Mark. I think that actually the issue with the Northern Ireland Protocol is that it essentially separates Northern Ireland into the European Union's orbit. And it means that we haven't got Brexit done because the Northern Ireland still are under the jurisdiction of the single market and still have to abide by the single market's regulations. Now, I will say I don't think that this is really the silver lining for Rishi Sunak. I think that when we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years, fixing the Northern Ireland Protocol won't be what will save him. However, it is a good start.
Indeed. What about you, Emma Wolfe? Do you think this could be the turning point for Rishi Sunak in his premiership? Not even on those the list of top 5 priorities, but if we can get this protocol sorted, we can all get on with our lives.
Look, Mark, I agree with you that it's incredibly important. We can't go on with this diplomatic deadlock. We just can't go on with it, and it does matter intensely to the people of Northern Ireland for trade and all of that out there. But I don't think this is something that's going to turn the tide for Rishi Sunak. I think the Conservative Party are in the death throes. I think they're going to limp towards the next election, which, let's remember, is next year. Down the dog and duck, the electorate are not talking about, general people are not talking about the protocol. They are not. They're talking about the cost of living. They're talking about strikes. They're talking about immigration. Talking about the NHS. Those are the things that matter. It'll be important for Rishi Sunak to get this under his belt if the DUP can be brought round to it, which, mixed messages actually coming out of that at the moment. But I don't think this is going to turn the tide for Rishi Sunak one jot.
However, Emma Burnell, you're nodding your head there, but it does change the narrative around this Prime Minister and this premiership, solving problems, winning arguments and getting things done. Ultimately, a breakthrough on the Northern Ireland Protocol will demonstrate Rishi Sunak's statecraft, which is a headache for Labour.
Well, I suspect it won't be a headache for Labour for 2 reasons. First of all, Emma is exactly right. In both Emma and Ram, I'm afraid we're in really boring agreement here, and I know that boring is not what we're allowed to do on your show. But I do think that this isn't the thing that is going to change the electorate's mind on whether this government is failing or not. What would be worse is if they don't get the deal over the line. That would, I think, put an even further dent into Rishi Sunak's already fairly battered public profile. But secondly, the other reason that Labour is it's almost certainly going to be Labour votes that will get this over the line in the Commons. And so Labour can then sort of say, hey, we are the cross-party statecraft party too. So I don't think this harms Labour at all. And I think Rishi Sunak will benefit by not losing if he manages to not lose. I do agree that it's the DUP that's really going to make the choice either way here, and that's where we just don't know whether this is going to get over the line or not.
What's your reaction? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your emails shortly on that. Don't forget, at 10 o'clock, my Mark Meets guest is Sir Bill Cash, of course, a legendary, long-standing Conservative MP. He entered the Commons in 1984. He was the longest-serving Conservative MP in the House of Commons. And this guy knows a thing or two about Brexit. He's the godfather of Brexit, frankly, alongside Nigel Farage and one or two others. We'll get his reaction to this deal. Is a Brexit breakthrough in the offing? We'll be asking Bill Cash. But also, Reem, interestingly, mentioned tax cuts and the Prime Minister. Should Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on tax rises? We'll be discussing that very, very shortly. Also, are the public sick of woke corporations? We'll speak to the top academic, Professor Matthew Goodwin, who's written a fascinating article about the fact that we're sick of being lectured by the likes of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and Halifax about political correctness. So lots to get through. But next, in the big question, was Nicola Sturgeon good for Scotland? We'll be debating that with none other than Anne Widdecombe. See you in 3.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Listen, we have a relationship and we talk every night, and you agree with me on some things, you don't agree on others. A lot of you are not having Rishi Sunak, and you're not having any potential compromise when it comes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. That was the topic of my big opinion. So let's get to your feedback straight away. John says, Mark, as someone who voted Tory for 13 years and has been betrayed by the Tories ousting Boris, I'm telling you, from a red wall voter, the Tories are out at the next election. Doesn't matter what Rishi does now. People are giving up on Brexit, immigration's out of control, and it's the working class voters that suffer the most because their children and grandchildren can't get social housing and wages will never improve, and migrant children who can't speak English get priority in the classroom, even if your child has a send the poor and working class, I didn't quite read exactly what you said there, but I think your point is well made, John, and thank you for making it. We'll get to more of your emails. Neil, if Sunak hasn't got the guts to put the Northern Ireland Protocol bill onto the statute book, that's just one more reason to throw him out. Megan says, I think Rishi's profile in the polls will rise significantly if he can pull off a deal acceptable to the DUP and Sinn Féin. But he'd also have to demonstrate deportation of thousands of illegal immigrants, and he's got to lower taxes. Well, Megan, we will be discussing whether Sunak should do a tax U-turn later this hour. A couple more, then we're good to go. Jacqueline, Mark, I think your panel are absolutely right. The electorate don't give a fig for the Northern Ireland Protocol. You just want to big up Rishi because you backed him from the start. He needs to sort out the things on his list of 5 first. Jacqueline, thank you for that. And last but not least, from Rick. Good evening, Rick. How are you? Rick has said, Dear Mark, I'm usually a supporter, but you've just shown the real Remainer that you still are. Compromise was always the Remainers' narrative. Compromise on the protocol would be the start of the mission creep back towards the EU. Rick, thank you for your point. Look, I take on board what you're saying, and I understand that the idea of compromise essentially involves continued alignment with the EU and their rules, and that is a huge problem. And let me tell you, hand on heart, since the day of the referendum, since that result came in, I have always wanted Brexit to succeed. I've always wanted a proper, full-fat Brexit, no customs union, no free movement, no single market. Let's do it properly. And I'm confident that Brexit will be a success. Keep those emails coming, Mark at gbnews.uk. Greg, are you ready? It's time for this. Yes, indeed. It's time for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Now, tonight, with news of her impending departure, and after 8 years in charge, was Nicola Sturgeon good for Scotland? And what will her departure mean for the shape of not just Scottish but British politics? Does it give Labour a better chance at the next election? To debate all of this, I'm delighted to welcome former Conservative Government Minister, best-selling author and TV personality Anne Widdecombe, who is our star every Sunday night on Mark Dolan Tonight, and a close ally and friend of Nicola Sturgeon. And let me tell you who it is. It is former SNP Glasgow City Councillor, broadcaster and writer Austin Sheridan. Austin, was Nicola Sturgeon good for Scotland?
Absolutely. Nicola Sturgeon was good for Scotland domestically and internationally as well. She certainly put Scotland on the map. In terms of her biggest achievements, I mean, for example, she led us through the COVID pandemic in such a fantastic manner, so much so that she managed to gain the largest share of the vote and largest number of votes during the 2021 holiday election, which was during the pandemic. Delivering on things like the baby box, delivering on things like the child payment to lift kids out of poverty, delivering infrastructure like the Queen's Ferry Cross. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon was great for Scotland. The most recent opinion poll actually showed that 64% of Scots felt she'd done a good job. And across the entirety of the UK, 46% felt that she'd done a good job. Those are stats that any 4 of the outgoing Tory Prime Ministers would have dreamed of when they left office.
Anne Widdecombe, Nicola Sturgeon must have been brilliant for Scotland. Otherwise, so many Scots wouldn't have kept voting for her.
Sorry, she was absolutely lousy for Scotland. I mean, if you actually look at the things that matter, measuring health service, for example, looking at education, which used to be, I mean, Scottish education used to be the jewel in the crown of UK education, now a complete mess. And then, of course, the reason that she has come to grief is because she tried to push an extreme transgender law, which the majority of Scottish voters simply didn't want and said so in poll after poll. And indeed, one of the most telling polls, I think, was when people were asked in Scotland if they'd rather be governed by a law passed at Westminster, which they did approve of, than by one in Edinburgh, which they didn't approve of. And they all said that they would prefer the first scenario. And finally, what did she always talk about? Scottish independence. First of all, the referendum went against Scottish independence. Then she promised a second one, which she couldn't deliver because it was unlawful, couldn't get it through Westminster, couldn't get it through the courts. Then she said she'd turn the next general election into an effective referendum on independence. And as far as we can make out from the polls again, that's not the way that the Scots want to do it. So, no. I mean, she was not good for Scotland. She was a strong personality. I mean, I absolutely agree with that. But she wasn't good for Scotland. I mean, you measure whether people are good for a country or not by the outcomes. And by the way, Mark, I'm just going to take this opportunity of saying it. I've never disagreed with you more tonight than when you were giving that introduction on Northern Ireland. Just never, Mark.
No, 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 says Anne Widdecombe. Anne, you're entitled to your view, and you are a titan of British politics, so I take on board what you have to say. Austin, let's have a look at some of the detail here. A massive attainment gap in education, upon which Nicola Sturgeon 5 years ago asked voters to judge her. Massive problems in the NHS. I believe a deficit that runs to the equivalent of 12% of Scotland's GDP. We've got alcoholism, we've got drug deaths through the roof. Scotland's financially broke. COVID outcomes were terrible. The country's in a mess 8 years on.
Well, just to answer Anne Widdecombe's point, I don't think it's any surprise that the SNP support independence, so of course we're going to talk about that. In terms of education, I mean, the attainment gap has been closing, but not closing as fast as what we would like. Obviously, education was deeply impacted during the pandemic, as was the health service, and we're seeing similar problems south of the border. The most recent stats on drug deaths actually showed that drug deaths in Scotland have now lowered, whereas south of the border, drug deaths have increased. So, as I say, these are challenges that not just the Scottish Government face, but governments of all complexions across these islands face, whether that's the Tories in England or Wales, or Labour in Wales. So these are all things that every government contends with. But in terms of the gender recognition reform, the most recent opinion poll, this was after Nicola Sturgeon announced her resignation, showed the SNP on 60 seats for Holyrood and 16 seats for the Green Party. That's double the number of Green MSPs. Showed the Tories losing 15 MSPs. So in actual fact, the gender recognition reform certainly hasn't damaged the parties that supported it. In actual fact, it's increased support, and it would deliver the largest pro-independence majority parliament we had ever seen. So it's a red herring to say that the gender recognition reform proposed by the SNP and supported by every single political party in the parliament apart from the Tories is a vote loser. In actual fact, it would appear it's a vote winner, because the only party decreasing are the Tories.
Well, that's because most of the main parties in Holyrood have lost the plot. And Austin Sheridan is suggesting there that the gender recognition bill hasn't been damaging for Scotland, hasn't been damaging for Nicola Sturgeon. She's just quit.
I know, he's in cloud cuckoo land, I'm afraid. He's doing a very valiant job of trying to defend Nicola Sturgeon, trying to defend her record, and he's pulling out all the stops. But honestly, you know, he's just not living in the real world. We know from poll after poll that the gender recognition bill in Scotland was profoundly unpopular in Scotland. And simply going and trying to extrapolate from a poll that shows voting intentions isn't an endorsement of the gender recognition bill. So I really don't think... Sorry, what did you say, Austin?
It's not a vote loser. People kept saying that the gender recognition reform was going to really damage the SNP. It was going to mean that voters were going to leave in droves. In actual fact, opinion polling showing that they're going to back parties even more, and the Tories are going to lose almost half their MPs.
Austin, you've just lost your leader. Nicola Sturgeon's just quit after 8 years.
But I wish it wasn't forced out of our party like the other Tory Prime Ministers, where Nicola Sturgeon left off her own accord. I mean, there's not very many leaders that can truly say that they left off their own accord. So I don't think the Tories are in any position to lecture other parties on the exit of the leaders, because they've been disastrous.
If it wasn't alleged corruption within the SNP, and if it wasn't the woke takeover of the party that most of the Scottish public hate, what was it that did for Nicola Sturgeon?
If most of the Scottish public hate it, why are the SNP leading in the polls? Why are the SNP set to have 60 MSPs at Holyrood? And why are they projected to have 45 out of the 57 new seats and for Westminster? I mean, we have to look at the reality here. The SNP aren't losing support. The SNP are still leading in opinion polls, and Nicola Sturgeon's approval ratings 64% in Scotland and 46% across the entirety of the United Kingdom. Any of the outgoing Tory Prime Ministers would have loved to have had those figures. But they didn't because they were a disaster.
I hate to throw numbers around, but a majority of Scots were against the gender recognition bill when last polled. Can we talk about what this does to Scottish politics? Does it leave the door open for Labour, Austin? Because Keir Starmer has said that Scottish voters will now look at Labour with fresh eyes.
Absolutely not, because the Labour Party don't offer what people in Scotland want, which is essentially re-entry back into the EU. Labour have closed the door on that. Labour have also said that they will not, under any circumstance, support Scotland choosing its own future. The problem with Keir Starmer in general, not just in Scotland but across the entirety of the UK, is he thinks that if he says nothing, that he's just going to walk into the election because the Tories are doing so badly. What kind of politician is that? Sir Keir Starmer is weak. And if the Labour Party, and this is free advice to them, if they actually want to have a leader that can govern properly, they should actually look at ditching him and replacing him with somebody who's actually got principles.
Anne, this could be good news for Keir Starmer. Has the departure, or will the departure of Nicola Sturgeon open the door to a Labour victory at the next election?
I think it certainly helps Labour. I don't think there's any point in denying that at all, although I'd like to think it didn't help Labour. I think it does help Labour. I think that it's been a big blow to the SNP. I think the whole mess around not only the gender recognition bill, but also the whole business of Scottish independence and the fact that she couldn't get a lawful second referendum. I think the whole thing does open the way for some Labour gains in Scotland. I've no doubt about that. I don't like it, but I think it's true.
Austin Sheridan, finally, why are you so loyal to Nicola Sturgeon? What's she got on you? Has she got pictures of you in your Speedos or something?
Oh my goodness, if she did, I would feel really, really sorry for her. Absolutely not. I believe that Nicola Sturgeon, as a politician, has always done what she believes is best. Now, sometimes they get it wrong, then that's fine. But I believe that Nicola Sturgeon is fundamentally well-intentioned, and that is the kind of person that I look for in a leader. So when we're looking at who is next going to be leading the SNP, I know within myself what I want to see them propose and what I want to see them take forward. I'm going to be judging them on that same merit. Are they genuine? Are they principled? And will they stand up for what they believe in? Something that Keir Starmer can't say that he does, because he's all over the place. He's like doublespeak.
Austin, we always love having you on the show. Austin Sheridan is a former SNP Glasgow City Councillor, broadcaster and political commentator and writer. And my thanks to Anne Widdecombe, of course, former Conservative Government Minister, best-selling author and TV personality, and the star of Mark Dolan tonight every Sunday evening in the Big Question slot. Anne, we'll see you in a week. Lots more to get through, but let me know your thoughts. Has Sturgeon been good for Scotland? Does it open the door to a Labour victory at the next election? Mark at gbnews.uk. My Mark Meets guest is Brexit-supporting Tory legend Sir Bill Cash. He's live in the studio. Is a Brexit breakthrough in the offing? Will Bill Cash disagree with me in the way that Anne has about a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol? All opinions are welcome. I love it when you don't agree, so do get in touch. Mark at gbnews.uk. Papers at 10:30, but next, are the public sick of woke corporations? See you in 2.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Sir Bill Cash is my Mark Meets guest, live in the studio after 10. Is a Brexit breakthrough in the offing? Now, new research suggests that Brits are cynical and tired of attempts by big business to force political views on employees and customers. This according to Policy Exchange. New polling by the political think tank reveals that the majority of the public, 58%, reject the suggestion that companies should be able to demand that their employees declare gender pronouns, he, him, she, her. When asked whether people support companies firing employees because they share controversial but legal beliefs on social media outside of working hours, only 12% backed that kind of censorship. Only 1 in 5 voters think companies should be able to refuse to do business with customers who hold beliefs that they disagree with. Matthew Goodwin, writer, broadcaster and politics professor at Kent University, carried out the polling. His new book, Values, Voice and Virtue, The New British Politics, is out next month, and you can pre-order now in what will likely be one of the politics books of the year. Matthew Goodwin joins me now. Hi, Prof. Good to have you back on the show, Matthew. Are we now seeing significant pushback from the public in relation to so-called wokeness or extreme political correctness? Is a pattern emerging here?
Well, firstly, I think it's remarkable that we spend a lot of our time talking about companies discriminating against workers because of their beliefs or insisting that their employees declare their gender pronouns, but nobody's really looked at whether ordinary people support this stuff. And when we went out and we surveyed a nationally representative survey of voters, large majorities of them said, actually, I don't think companies should be demanding that their workers use pronouns. I don't think they should be discriminating against people because of their political beliefs. I don't think they should be monitoring what their workers are doing on social media outside of working hours. And so you put all of this together, and once again, what we find is that this very radical belief system that's becoming increasingly visible in our institutions isn't actually really supported by a large majority of people.
Indeed. We've seen the Halifax and their policy of asking employees on a voluntary basis to have pronouns on their name badges. We've had Ben & Jerry's, who sell ice cream, being critical of the government's borders policy and the Rwanda plan. Why have companies become so political, Matthew?
Well, they would say it's because they are, they're virtuous, they're morally righteous, they are sort of aligning themselves with, the new mood of the moment. When we ask ordinary people, your viewers out there, only 10% of them say they think companies are doing this for sincere reasons. A lot of people out there, I think, are looking at the adverts they're seeing on television. I think they're looking at the posters they're seeing on the tube. I think they're looking at what they're seeing in their workplace. And to be frank, I think they're quite skeptical, if not cynical. There's a hypocrisy with this. And let's be clear about this because it's important. When a major retailer who will go unnamed demands on Twitter that everybody celebrates, say, Black History Month, and if they don't, they're not welcome to shop at that retailer. But at the same time, that company is stripping rights away for workers, or their CEO is involved in a tax avoidance scheme to pay as little tax as possible, that hypocrisy is not lost on people. And I think that's really what rubs a lot of voters up the wrong way. They feel that they're being lectured to. They feel that they're being told that they're morally inferior. And at the same time, the companies are clearly doing everything they can to avoid contributing to the national community. And I think a lot of voters, as the polling shows, are pretty fed up with that.
Really looking forward to your book. Given that Nicola Sturgeon's political career has arguably ended because of her attachment to a particularly woke issue, gender ideology, which blindly accepts the premise that a man is a woman, or vice versa, will growing public irritation at political correctness be a factor at the next election, do you think? I believe it's been decisive in Scotland already. Will we see that at the next UK-wide general election?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. You and I have been talking about this for some time, and it wasn't that long ago everybody on Twitter and in London and Westminster would tell you that, well, culture war politics is dead-end politics, that these issues won't really change anything. Well, look at Scotland. The message from Scotland is that if you aggressively pursue a policy which is only supported by 20% of Scots, the MSP that you just had on was clearly not reading the research on where public opinion is. And if these policies that are only supported by a small minority are just imposed on people, then guess what? There's going to be a political backlash to that. So as I said in the aftermath of Nicola Sturgeon's downfall, and as I write about in the book, I think a lot of Labour MPs, a lot of folks on the left are going to be looking at these debates and thinking, actually, if we keep pushing this as hard as we are, there is potentially going to be a pretty strong backlash from voters who are fed up of being lectured to about these ideas and these issues. And I suspect Keir Starmer's probably watched the Nicola Sturgeon episode quite closely and will probably, if he's wise, be thinking, I should start rowing back actually on some of this.
Yes, I mean, that image of him taking the knee, I think we can all agree, we can condemn racism, the most evil stain on humanity, Matthew, but that photo of him taking the knee could be politically divisive for him, perhaps in some of those red wall seats, just because it's seen as political opportunism, virtue signalling, woke finger-wagging.
Well, I think the mood is changing. I think a lot of voters, as we can see in the polling, actually, are becoming more aware of what this woke issue is. I think a lot of voters and your viewers out there are now, I think, increasingly aware that this isn't just about being nice to people, that there is a pretty concerted political project that is aligned to this, that when you're asking a worker to show their pronouns, what you're asking them, and let's be clear about this, is to align themselves with gender identity theory. You're asking them to align themselves with a very specific belief system, which many people would argue is not really grounded in science and is an ideology, right? And I think a lot of voters are looking at this and now thinking, I'm not actually down with, allowing kids to legally change their gender without any medical advice. I'm not really comfortable with renaming pregnant women pregnant persons. I'm not really comfortable with decolonizing all of our university reading lists. And I'm not comfortable with revising how we think about our national history so that we're always told about the bad and we're never told about the good. And I think that rebellion that we are beginning to see, and there are little signs of it. Take the bestseller list this week in the book section of the papers. One of the top bestsellers, Nigel Biggar's book on colonialism, in which he offers a counter view to the woke view. He says, British history got a lot of things wrong, but it got a lot of things right. And let's talk about some of those things it got right. And I sense in the culture, actually, that there is the beginning of this pushback, a big ecosystem of organizations, networks, media channels like GBNews, Substacks, Twitter, YouTube shows. I think that ecosystem is beginning to build, and I think we're beginning maybe to get that diversity of view, to not to use a pun, but that diversity of viewpoint that I think is really, really important in pushing down an ideology that is really only supported, Mark, by about 15 to 20% of the country, and that's the crucial point here.
Fair enough. Well, listen, let me tell you can pre-order Matthew's new book, Values, Voice and Virtue, The New British Politics. It's out now, but you can order it straight away. I'll be reading it very shortly. We asked you on Twitter if you think the public is sick of woke corporations. 91.9% say yes, 8.1% say no. Don't forget, my Mark Meets guest is Sir Bill Cash. Lots to come. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Is a Brexit deal in the offing? Is a Brexit breakthrough on the way next week? I'll be asking Tory legend, of course, lifelong Eurosceptic MP Sir Bill Cash. He's with me after 10. Big reaction to my big opinion. Mark says, Ian, yet another example of Brexit betrayal. Stop this slithering up to the European Union trouser leg. Have you forgotten the European Union threatened to invoke Article 16 on a whim to thwart our vaccine programme? Wake up! Pam says, hi Mark, if Bill Cash, Lord Frost, IDS, Sir John Redwood and Ben Habib approve Rishi's plan, that's good enough for me. Anything short of their approval is a big no-no unless they invoke Article 16. Pam, thank you for that. I'll get to more of your emails. A quick one on, are you sick of woke corporations lecturing you about politics and political correctness? This from Alan, who speaks for many. Woke can go to hell. Just ignore it and don't conform to this nonsense. Thank you, Alan. Keep those emails coming, Mark at gbnews.uk. Now, reacting to the big stories of the day, my all-star panel, award-winning playwright and political commentator Emma Burnell, best-selling author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, and top political commentator, a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, Reem Ibrahim. Now, 7 senior Conservative backbenchers signed letters to the Prime Minister demanding tax cuts. They want April's planned rise in corporation tax to be scrapped. So it begs the question, should Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on tax rises? Reem, you mentioned this in reaction to my big opinion, so why don't you take it away? Your argument for cutting corporation tax, for example.
Argument for cutting corporation tax. So Rishi Sunak has already announced that he's going to increase it from 19% to 25%. That crushes businesses. And we're not just talking big corporations, we're talking about small businesses, those hard-working people in this country that are just being crushed by the tax burden. Now, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. We've got a higher tax burden under this so-called Conservative government than we did under the socialist governments of Clement Attlee, when we had the NHS established. That is absurd to me. And the fact that we've still got this going on, I think, is ridiculous. Now, Sunak, to me, is a high-tax, high-spend Conservative. We're already seeing this drive out investment. So AstraZeneca, for example, have already pulled a £320 million investment deal within the north of England, put it over to the Republic of Ireland, where their taxes are much lower, and they've been open about the fact that taxes were the cause. This, to me, shows that actually the United Kingdom will be going down a path of decline if we do not get a grip of this tax burden.
However, who's going to pay for this tax cut? We've got £2 trillion worth of national debt, a deficit, which means that more comes out than goes in every month, and raging inflation.
Absolutely. So we've got to be able to cut spending. We cannot do the Liz Truss and sort of initially go down and cut that spending, cut those taxes straight away. We've got to balance the books and cut spending in the first instance, and then we're able to cut those taxes.
And where would you cut? Which department?
Oh, honestly, every government department, I think there's a lot of waste at the moment within government bureaucracy, particularly when it comes to the public services. So with the education, healthcare, at the moment with the NHS, for example, we spend just below £200 billion a year. We do not need to be spending that much on healthcare.
Indeed. People boast that the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe. Not sure that's a boast, because in the end it demonstrates possibly how inefficient it is. But Emma, what do you think about these tax cuts? It will stimulate the economy, creates growth, which means we can then look after vulnerable people.
I think two things. First of all, Rishi Sunak has essentially made his political name on not being Liz Truss. And that means fiscal conservatism, and that does mean probably sticking to his current plans and not going hell for leather on tax cuts. He's also looking at an election in the next 18 months. He's not going to start massive spending cuts when everything is falling apart already. So just politically, I think it's a bad idea. I think we should be spending more on public services. They clearly need it at the moment.
You think the tax Do you think the tax rises are a bad idea?
No, I think cutting the. I think
Okay.
they've got, but I think
So
there
you
are.
support the rise.
I support the raise in corporation tax, but I do think that we could look at corporation tax. Reem's right that a lot of corporation tax comes from smaller businesses who are struggling. I'm thinking particularly about pubs and restaurants at the moment, and cafes. Those hubs of neighbourhoods which are really struggling at the moment, and they're really, really having a hard time post-COVID rebuilding. So I think there can be more done to really change the tax code around, but I don't think that's what's going to happen between now and the budget. I just think that politically Sunak does not have the space to cut this, to change this tax rise in any way from the general public, and he certainly doesn't have the space to make the spending cuts that Reem's talking about in order to get that done.
OK, we've had for and against. Emma Wool?
I think I'd be more impressed with these senior Tories and kind of captains of industry if they were calling for windfall taxes on the obscene oil and gas profits, if they were calling for some kind of break on the scandalous food price inflation in major supermarkets. I don't think that actually trickle-down... I'm not as convinced by trickle-down economics as the rest of you are, Mark.
Oh, no, I'm not at all convinced.
All of you. I think you start from the bottom.
Trickle-down's a mischaracterisation. It's just that if the tax rates go up...
I don't care. AstraZeneca are welcome to sling their hook and go over to the Republic of Ireland.
You need national income, don't you?
Yes, you need national income. And long term, of course, that's what you need to do. But right now, I think you start from the bottom up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, spending on the, cutting
this country is on its
taxes
knees.
and putting more money and making things cheaper for people who actually spend money in the economy rather than those who hoard it.
What would you say, though, to somebody running a small or medium-sized enterprise that employs perhaps 100 people that argue they're either going to have to lay people off or possibly they will fold as a result of this tax increase, and that will happen?
Yeah, OK, there is an argument for delaying this or for junking this, but I'm just not worried about these huge the huge businesses. I'm really not.
Yeah, they're going to be driven out of the United Kingdom. Then you're going to have those medium businesses driven out of the United Kingdom.
That's what they say.
I mean,
it's like all the people that were going to leave.
Economics 101, the Laffer curve. If you increase taxation, actually, you end up getting less taxation for the Treasury.
Well, and also recent statistics suggest that 2,000 or 3,000 millionaires leave the country every year as it stands, partly because of tax. And the bottom line is, I know we live in an unequal world, and that's very sad, but we need these rich people here to spend their money here, and we need.
But they don't spend money. Poor people spend money. Rich people hoard money, and we actually need. We need
rich people don't leave the country if they want to be here. If they have their big house and they have their children in schools here.
It's communist corner.
It's not. And yeah, exactly. It's weird, isn't it?
Absolutely not.
It's common sense corner.
Emma Woolf's been got at.
I've gone left tonight. I've gone lefty tonight.
I'm so persuasive.
Well, look, OK, Reem, final word from you.
I just think it's ridiculous to insinuate that rich people always hoard their money. That is genuine communism. I think that what we need to be thinking about
But they don't spend.
They don't spend their money in supermarkets.
They invest their money, and they invest their money in small businesses, just like those that have run across the country.
Last time I saw a royal running a corner shop, next time I see that, I'll let you know.
Well, look, I've got to say, I'm all about the wealth creators, but I'm about the corner shop as well. What's your view, Mark, at gbnews.uk? Coming up in my take at 10, I'm going to be dealing with Prince Andrew, who's likely to be turfed out of his £30 million royal lodge. Poor him. That's the topic of my take at 10. I'm not pulling my punches. It's pretty eye-watering stuff. Prince Andrew gets the Dolan treatment next. And also, my Mark Meets guest is a very special man, Brexit-supporting Tory legend Sir Bill Cash. The godfather of Brexit, if you like. He's live in the studio, taking your questions. Mark at gbnews.uk. All of that is next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan tonight. Wonderful to have your company. In my take at 10 in just a moment, Prince Andrew is likely to be turfed out of his £30 million royal lodge, with King Charles tightening the purse strings. Good news! It's time the pompous prince paid his own way. My Mark Meets guest is one of the longest-serving MPs in Parliament and the godfather of Brexit, Sir Bill Cash. We'll discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU and Boris Johnson. Is a Brexit breakthrough on the way? Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 with full panel reaction. But next up, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew and sparks will fly. First, Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Lancashire police are working to identify a body that was recovered from the River Wyre. It was located in the area where mother of two, Nicola Bully, disappeared more than 3 weeks ago. They're currently treating the death as unexplained and say her family has been informed of the latest developments. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the news as heartbreaking and distressing. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville says the post-mortem examination might not give us information about what happened.
There'll be a formal identification. The body's obviously, if it is Nicola, has been in the river a long, nearly 3 weeks, or best more than 3 weeks. So whether the post-mortem can ever tell us whether she entered deliberately or by accident, perhaps we'll never know. There's been too much speculation in this case, of course. We've had all sorts of ghouls going down there and causing even more hurt for the family. So the sooner the police can get the post-mortem and the identification done, I'm sure they'll be keen to get that information out there.
The Prime Minister has rejected calls by senior Conservative MPs to scrap a planned rise in corporation tax. Rishi Sunak is set to introduce a new policy hiking the tax from 19% to 25% in April. But several Tory backbenchers are encouraging Mr Sunak to abandon the increase as part of the March budget, saying it would be a blow to levelling up hopes. However, a government spokesperson says it's vital to stick to it in order to halve inflation this year and reduce debt. Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs, and the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. And the movie All Quiet on the Western Front took the BAFTAs by storm this evening, taking home 7 awards. And with that, it broke the BAFTAs record for the most awards won by a film not in English. Well, Elvis star Austin Butler won the BAFTA for the Best Leading Actor. He beat Colin Farrell, who'd been the favourite to take the prize. And The Banshees of Inisherin was among the other big winners this evening, winning the award for Outstanding British Film. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Tatiana Sanchez, who's back at 11. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, a busy hour. My Mark Meets guest is one of the longest-serving MPs in Parliament, and many consider him the godfather of Brexit, Sir Bill Cash. We'll discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU and Boris Johnson. Is a Brexit breakthrough on the way? Also, we've got Monday's front pages. Tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp, with full panel reaction, lots to get through, plus my all-star panel. But next up, it's my take at 10. Prince Andrew used to be known as Randy Andy. Well, now he's Angry Andy, as the Duke of York faces eviction from his £30 million home, the Royal Lodge in Windsor, which boasts 30 bedrooms. That's £1 million per room. Nice work if you can get it. But Charles may cut his income so he can no longer afford to keep living there and maintain the building. It must be a nightmare for poor old Andy. And if he's watching, let me offer the Prince this gift from the team at Mark Dolan tonight. There it is. It's the world's smallest violin. Don't forget, this is a prince who has brought the royal family into disrepute with his friendship with known paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And he made a fool of himself and his family with that Newsnight interview in which he claimed to have a disorder in which he doesn't sweat. Well, he's sweating now as he faces life on the streets. I wouldn't go that far, of course. It turns out the privileged prince has inherited millions from his late mother and father and has enjoyed a reported annual salary of £250,000 from the royal coffers since 2001. Our modernising, dynamic new king, Charles III, who I think we can all agree has got off to a cracking start, wants to have a slimmed-down monarchy. And the first lump of unwanted fat they should get rid of is Andrew himself, who hasn't just shamefully discredited members of his own family, he is a national embarrassment. He feels so unloved in this country, apparently. There's press speculation he may follow Harry and Meghan to America. They've got a massive place in Montecito, California. Lots of billionaires there. He likes billionaires. Why doesn't he lodge himself with Harry and Meghan? Apparently, in their mansion, they've got 16 bathrooms. Perfect for a guy who is so full of crap. Andrew goes to America. Perfect. Allow me to pay the airfare myself, as long as it's one way. King Charles is right to deal with this fat cat royal because Charles wants to demonstrate that the new improved Monarchy 2.0 is in step with the modern world. To earn its keep, to run a tight ship and give the great British public some bang for their buck. You get the wrong kind of banging from Randy Andy. And don't forget, Prince Andrew is a man who has been gifted a house by his own mother when he got married, but sold it to an Arab businessman for £15 million in 2007. This is a man who settled out of court to the tune of millions against his accuser, Virginia Giuffre. To be fair, he has protested his innocence from day one. No problem. He may have been stitched up, who knows? But either way, his behaviour has been below par for a top royal, and he hasn't shown an ounce of contrition for the embarrassment he's brought to his family and to his country. Who could blame his older brother, who has served the country with distinction and integrity for decades, from turfing old Randy Andy out of his current digs? Andrew will be fine, of course. He has a personal wealth you and I can only dream of. He never has to work again, not that he did in the first place. So it's time to dislodge this royal lodger from the Royal Lodge. Andrew should be getting sweet FA from his home sweet home. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.uk. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport and beyond. Tonight, one of the most experienced and respected politicians in the country, Sir Bill Cash, who has been serving as a Conservative Member of Parliament since 1984, first elected for Stafford and then the constituency of Stone in Staffordshire in 1997. After his 10th election victory in 2019, Sir Bill became the oldest sitting member of the House of Commons, but with the energy and enthusiasm of a man half his age, particularly when it comes to Europe. A committed Eurosceptic, Sir Bill has long campaigned for our departure from the European Union. He was appointed a Knight Bachelor in the 2014 birthday honours and is the elected chair of the House of Commons European Scrutiny Committee. Who better to scrutinise Europe than Sir Bill? Born in London but growing up in Sheffield, Bill was educated at Stonyhurst College in Lancashire before reading history at Oxford. He qualified as a solicitor in 1967, but a political career beckoned and the rest is history. Sir Bill, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight.
Mark, nice
Great
to
to have
see
you on the
And
programme,
you too.
sir.
Very good to see you.
Let's deal with an immediate political issue.
Yeah.
Is a Brexit breakthrough in the offing?
Well, I don't really think it is, actually, and I'll tell you why. First of all, there is no text at all. So there's zero paper to look at. Nobody really knows what the ingredients, what the details are. That's number one. And the second thing is that the issues are so huge that the idea that I'm reading on some of the WhatsApps that somehow or other people could be bounced into an agreement on Tuesday is absolutely ludicrous, because if that was to be attempted, that would set up a whole chain of reactions which would not be helpful. We obviously want to have a solution to the problems of Northern Ireland. We had the Troubles. There has been civil disorder. Stability is absolutely essential. The Good Friday Agreement is essential. To put all this at risk by trying to rush it without any documentation so that nobody can actually see what's been happening. I mean, I've been talking to some of the DUP people over the last couple of days, and they did have a meeting, but as far as I'm aware, they haven't seen any texts. And it's the written word that really matters as well as the objectives. And you can't trust the EU. I mean, let's be frank about it. Yeah. I've come to this conclusion, having been, as you said, on the European Committee since 1985.
Well, during the pandemic, the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen briefly threatened to erect a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland over the vaccine rollout.
Absolutely.
Even though they'd obfuscated about getting a deal because of not having a border.
Oh, absolutely.
So, abject hypocrisy.
And what was amazing was the fact that they actually imposed a prohibition on exports of those vaccines to the UK. Well, I mean, it was done under so-called Article 16. They had to come back off it. They had to cancel it within 2 days. But the objective was to prevent the AstraZeneca vaccines and others from coming over to the UK.
And they were going to tear up contracts.
I know,
so
absolutely shocking.
Behaving like like cowboy builders.
Well, absolutely right.
However, we do need this resolved. And as I said in my big opinion, I don't think it does the Brexit cause any favours to have another decade of wrangling over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Our viewers, my viewers and listeners in Northern Ireland are suffering. They don't have government, as you know. I know that's a big priority for you. What about some compromise? So, for example, green and red lanes, which means that any goods intended for sale only in Northern Ireland go through a green lane, minimal or no checks at all. And also, the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, only enters a dispute if referred to by the Northern Ireland courts. That sounds like a deal to me.
Well, it looks like a deal to those people who don't necessarily know how these things work in practice. The bottom line is, without the detail about these green and red lanes, and we haven't seen the text, as I've said, I wouldn't put any money on being certain that that would work in the first place. The second thing is that regarding the European Court and regarding the number of EU laws that have been made behind closed doors by majority vote by the Council of Ministers in Europe without any involvement whatsoever from anybody, either from the UK or indeed from Northern Ireland, is an absolutely massive democratic deficit, as we call it. Yeah. It's a massive democratic vacuum. Imagine, we've got 2 million people in Northern Ireland. Imagine if you take, for example, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool put together, that's 2 million people. Imagine if they all had laws passed over their heads by this system behind closed doors by majority vote, and they weren't involved in it whatsoever. This is a massive problem, and it can't be resolved just by the waving of some magic wand and saying, oh, well, there's some means of trying to ensure that the Court of Justice is somehow not going to be involved. All the evidence is that the way in which the EU always ultimately makes its mind up is that they will stick by the European Court of Justice as being the key factor in the decisions that are taken.
Now, you've never been the most effusive supporter of the Prime Minister. I mean, he has your support because you're a loyal guy, but you're not a cheerleader for Rishi Sunak. I don't think you've backed his candidacy in the leadership election. But he's a smart cookie. And clearly he has an eye for detail. And he's got a political antenna, hasn't he? He's not naive enough to present a deal to the Eurosceptic Tory backbenchers or indeed the DUP that won't wash with them. He's got something, surely.
Well, that's a good guess, but actually I wouldn't bank on it, because the reality is that I've said these things are very, very deeply rooted. I mean, people actually fought and died over the question of whether or not we'd have a free democracy. We were conned into going into the European Union in the first place, which was then the European Community. I wrote a piece the other day and I pointed out that the Con O'Neill, who was the negotiator for this, actually says in his own report to the then Foreign Secretary that he didn't grasp the legal framework of the European system. I mean, it was beyond imagination. So those people who are saying that we ought to go back in again, or that there's some other kind of deal that could be put on the table, must understand that this is a completely different arrangement to what we have in our country. We have MPs who decide on behalf of the electorate, be they Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whatever they are. They go into the ballot box, they go into the ballot room, they put in their vote, and then those decisions are taken by the majority in a given constituency. Those people are then in Parliament making the laws of this country. In the European Union, it's absolutely the other way around. It's made behind closed doors by majority vote. And the laws that have been made, my committee have calculated that there's something of the order of 450 of these laws that have been passed since Brexit in relation to Northern Ireland over the heads of these people. Well, you can imagine that they really are fed sick and tired and very angry about this, because they've had no say in it whatsoever. And unless they come up with a way of being able to ensure that they are actually involved, then this democratic vacuum continues.
Well, is a Brexit breakthrough on the cards? Some doubt there from Bill Cash. Bill Cash is going to stay with me. It's a Mark Meets special. Next up, can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? We'll discuss that with Sir Bill next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Still with me for a Mark Meets special is Sir Bill Cash. Let's go back to the beginning, Sir Bill.
Okay.
Did your childhood and your early life shape your politics?
Well, I think it did. I was brought up, in fact, I was born on the day at the very time when Hitler invaded France. On the 10th of May 1940, Churchill became Prime Minister that day by some extraordinary coincidence, as you might say. But actually,
2 important events that day.
But it was. My mother must have been reeling. My father was a lieutenant doing his artillery training. Yeah. And basically, I mean, the fact is that the whole of his career, he was killed in the war, got the military cross, duty, principle, fighting for your country, that sort of thing. I was brought up along those lines. And when I went to school, I had a similar kind of background. We had 7 VCs at my school. Out of quite a small school of 300 people. We were taught very much self-discipline, duty, patriotism, and to do the right thing. So for practical purposes, I think that had quite a big impact. And then I read history at Oxford. I then went into constitutional law, so I learned a lot about what I call
useful recently.
Well, it has, because it meant that I was doing this work. I mean, I was advising Quebec, for example, in relation to the Canadian Constitution and all that sort of thing.
And you
I won't
across
go into
the
it all.
Maastricht Treaty,
yeah, I did all that.
Which you found wanting.
All that. So I'd learned a lot while I was growing up. And then when I went into Parliament in 1984, I had an advantage in one sense, which was, without overdoing it, that I did understand how the mechanics of these things worked and what needed to be done if you wanted to oppose provisions and so on. Then they made the most astonishing, I think, in retrospect, and I think they think in retrospect, a terrible mistake. In 1985, they put me on the European Select Committee. And then I saw the whole thing completely clearly because I saw all the detail. And by 1986, Margaret's still in power, and I put down a sovereignty amendment. And do you know something, Mark? They wouldn't even allow me to debate it. And I got up and remonstrated twice, and I was told to sit down. And of course, now that wouldn't happen because of what we've done since. Yeah. So to cut a long story short, after that, Margaret was assassinated, and then it was over Europe, of course. Yeah. And then after that, Maastricht Rebellion, because the creation of European government was what the Maastricht Treaty was all about.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning, and then Nice, Amsterdam, Lisbon, then the referendum campaigns, and every single one of these was all associated. We set up a Maastricht referendum campaign in a place called Great College Street in Westminster, where we put all the briefs together, and every day we'd go in with these piles of briefs, and of course the whips would look, oh my godfathers, not again. And the reality was that they couldn't answer the questions.
Yeah.
So
Eurosceptic rebels were nicknamed, allegedly nicknamed the bastards,
yes,
by John Major at the time.
Yes, I'm sure it's true.
And
I'm sure it's true, so
yeah, there you go. You're a lawyer. We'll tread carefully. And I think that David Cameron might have referred to the ERG as swivel-eyed loons or something of that
something
flavour.
of that kind. It doesn't
something
really matter.
disparaging.
Yes.
So Eurosceptics were previously judged to be an obscure minority, sort of just left-field nutters, except that the referendum happened and you won.
Well, can I tell you why we got the referendum? It was because I observed that actually, having been turned down in debating the sovereignty question, which is about who governs this country, it's about the democratic question, that the collusion between the two front benches meant that they'd stay in the European Union at any price. The only way around it was to get Parliament to abdicate its decision-making process, hand it over to the people, and that's why I set up the Maastricht referendum campaign, to bypass Parliament and get Parliament to agree to do it. And that's what David Cameron, after a huge number of attempts to get a referendum bill, Margaret Thatcher's last act in the House of Commons, as I recall, was to vote for a referendum on Maastricht. So for practical purposes, we created a step-by-step approach, and that created a sense that this was serious and had to be dealt with. And we got the referendum bill through in 2015, and I always believed we would win it. Because you know the one thing that's most important about British politics? The British people's common sense, the British people's sense of identity, the British people's understanding of democracy. I believe in it, and they really understand it. So they don't take too much notice of a lot of the opinion polls and things. They do the thing that they believe is the right thing to do. And that is how we got it through.
And your emotions when you I mean, you won't have woken up to the news. You'll have been at a count somewhere.
No, I wasn't.
On
the referendum.
You got the news, yeah. When we left the European Union.
Actually, the referendum. I woke up at about 2:30 in the morning, and I heard the result in Sunderland. I'd gone to bed earlier because I thought we were going to win. I wasn't complacent because I was actually going to do some...
Nigel half conceded, didn't he, at 1 a.m?
Well, that's true, but I had actually been asked to go on various television programmes later in the morning, so I wanted to get some sleep before that. Yeah. So I did, and then I woke up and heard the result in Sunderland, and I went back to sleep again because I could see if we won in Sunderland...
And your emotions then, the next day, the days after that, your emotions, having campaigned for this for decades, tell me what went through your mind, how you felt.
Sigh of relief. You have no idea.
Why relief? Why is that?
Relief because I believe that it was absolutely essential to maintain the right of the British people to govern themselves by their own elected MPs and not have these laws imposed on them.
And Bill, some people think that Brexit's a bit of a botched job, including the Northern Ireland Protocol, etc. I know it's not perfect, but is it still better than Remain?
It's absolutely 100% better, but it's not only that. The real reason why there are uncertainties and difficulties as we speak is because of COVID, which cost 400 billion, and also the Ukraine war, which pushed up the cost of living.
Inflation,
so people's discontent,
supply chains.
Yeah, people's discontent about the cost of living and inflation and all the things that go with that for small businesses and the rest are sort of, as it were, enveloped in a feeling that things aren't going properly. But believe me, we've got the retained EU law bill through, and that gets rid of the EU laws. And I give Rishi Sunak credit for that, because he's put that through.
So, Bill, it's been a Mark Meets special. I could do a Mark Dolan Tonight special with you, frankly, and I know our viewers and listeners would love it as well. Only a few seconds to go.
Yes, of course.
Let me tell you, you're as fit as a fiddle. You've got the energy of a man half your age, but you could be on a beach. Why aren't you?
Oh, because I've got a job to do. And the job is to look after my constituents. And can I pay tribute to my Stone Constituency Association and all the people in my constituency who've returned me, ever since 1984, Even when Maastricht was on, they gave me a standing ovation in a meeting when I had to explain to them why I was really making trouble for the government, my own government. But the bottom line is, being a backbencher enables you to be able to do things which you can't do if you're a minister. So it's much better to be a backbencher if you want to fight the really big battles on the really big issues.
There you go. I might have a title for your next book, The Backbencher That Changed the World. Sir Bill Cash, a delight to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you.
I really look forward to our next encounter. Lots more to come, folks, including tomorrow's papers with full panel reactions. See you shortly.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
And it's time for tomorrow's papers. OK, we'll put 10p in the meter. It is the papers. And, of course, they are hot off the press. Where shall we start, Cal? OK, we've got The Independent, and they lead with the following. Free school meals for every primary pupil in London. The Mayor of London will today announce an emergency package to extend free school meals to every primary school child in the capital for 1 year in an effort to help poorer families through the cost of living crisis. Also, Boris slapped down for Brexit treachery. Tory grandee leads warnings to ex-PM and allies. And also, body found in the hunt for missing Nicola Bulley. You've been hearing about that in the headlines with Tatiana. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. OK, next up, we've got the I newspaper. Police find body in river near where Nicola Bulley went missing. Also, controlling inflation, top priority to fix economy, say voters. Well, let me tell you, the voters are right. Weapons shortages mean UK's lead warship isn't fully armed, is another story in the Eye. Metro Nicola body is found. The Daily Mail. Missing Nicola body found less than a mile from where she vanished. Also, Kate's opera gloves steal BAFTA's show. And the Daily Star. There's gold in them, the Birmingham Hills. I'm going to get my Midlands accent sorted out. Brum's Rush. I don't know what any of this means. My lucky strike at secret location. A stunned panning prospector found gold dust in a Birmingham River, but he won't say where it is so he can find a massive nugget. Don't all rush at once. And those are your front pages, which I'm going to get my panel to help me explain. I'm delighted to say we've got a fabulous panel tonight reacting to the big stories of the day. So, for example, we have Emma Burnell, who is a best-selling playwright, author and political commentator. We have Emma Wolf, author and TV and radio presenter, and a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, Reem Ibrahim, journalist and political commentator. It's hard to know, isn't it, Emma Wolf, what to say in relation to the search for Nicola Bulley. The police have found a body. It hasn't been identified yet. It's a tragic, horrific story that may reach its conclusion in the next 24 hours.
It looks that way, doesn't it? One can't draw any other conclusion, and I can only imagine what the family... You just imagine them waiting for that call. There's not much one can say, really.
No.
There aren't many bodies in rivers, and... There were no clues leading anywhere, really, so it just seems like this is probably going to be a very, very awful end to a just terrible, sad story.
Emma, have the police made a Horlicks of this investigation?
I mean, it does look rather like it, doesn't it? I actually know St Michael's on the Wire, I'd say I know it. 20 years ago, I knew it quite well. My uncle lived there. He moved out 20 years ago.
What kind of place is it?
It's a tiny village. It's a really small... It's a one-bus-stop village, basically, or at least it was
And
there.
very scenic.
Very scenic, very beautiful. I mean, the Lancashire countryside is gorgeous. And it just feels like it's been overwhelmed, I think, by crazy onlookers, people coming in to film TikTok videos and stuff like that. And I think that hasn't been well managed by the police. I think, to be fair, they didn't expect it, but it's been a long time now, it's been ongoing, and it hasn't been well managed. And then these sort of very odd revelations about Nicola Bulley's problems that she'd had, that just felt a little bit more like the police were covering their own bums than they were giving us, the public, information that we needed. I don't think we did need to know those things about Nicola Bulley, and now that it probably has come to such a tragic end, I don't think the family needed to be put through that being made public.
No, I mean, I think that the police investigators need to know that information, but not us, Reem.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I think that I just want to echo what both Emmas have said, and that this is a hugely tragic story. And the fact that this information was made public to begin with, I think, is awful. I think also the fact that, I mean, a lot of young people that have come along filming TikToks are just incredibly insensitive to the situation. I think that, especially when it comes to my generation, we need to learn some humility, and we need to learn the sensitivity of these situations.
Indeed. The social media element to this was unwelcome, wasn't it? I mean, obviously you can't dictate to people and if they've got the technology at their disposal, but people were turning up and doing TikToks.
TikToks, they were filming dances, they were filming, sort of investigative videos, and I just think it's, first of all, not only does it potentially tamper with evidence, and that's
deeply unhelpful in a possible, scene of a crime.
Absolutely, and that's
evidence.
partly, the police should have, I think, cordoned the area in the first instance. That's partly their blunder, but also people need to have some common sense. Do not go into those areas where there is obviously a crime scene. It's not only insensitive, but actually physically could actually hamper the investigation.
I think there's a real problem that everyone wants to put themselves at the heart of this story rather than thinking there's a real family here and a real woman who has disappeared at least and probably has passed. And those real feelings are not about your profile. They're not about your sense of yourself at the centre of any story, and I think that's a real worry.
Let's have a look at The Independent now, if I can. Reem, free school meals for every primary pupil in London. Victory for the independent newspapers campaign as the Mayor brings in a flagship £130 million scheme. Clearly, there are deprived youngsters who need state support. But what about this blanket provision for all primary school pupils?
I mean, not to throw around the word socialist, but it is a socialist policy. It is a blanket approach to everyone. If you want to help the poorest in society, the most vulnerable children that definitely need those free school meals at school, then you help them. You don't help everybody. Essentially, what this means is those children that are children of millionaires, children of very middle-class families, they're also being covered by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer has to foot this £130 million bill. I think it's unacceptable. You've got to have targeted approach to these situations. That's why we have free school meals as a government policy in the first place. It's targeted to those vulnerable children that need it, and we do not need to give it to everyone.
Is it the state, Emma Wolf, overplaying its hand? And is it a legacy of the pandemic where the government said, you stay at home and we'll pay 80% of your wages? Is that the mentality, or is this an important policy to help struggling families?
It is an important policy. And, it's really, really important for children. Children desperately need good, high-quality nutrition.
Do we want the state, though, becoming responsible
brains.
for feeding kids rather than families, which is how it always has been?
Yeah, but there are families who cannot feed their children properly, and you know and I know that a hungry child is not a healthy child, it's not a happy child. Children desperately need good nutrition in order to learn, to grow, to play, to concentrate, they're at school, for goodness sake.
I'm absolutely not disputing that,
but the blanket, I haven't touched on that. I agree with Reem, actually, that the blanket provision of free school meals, I think as long as it's done sensitively, it should be targeted at the lower income end of the spectrum. But what I wouldn't want is a situation where some kids, you're very sensitive. When you're a kid, you're very sensitive at school about getting anything for free, being the poor one, not being able to go on school holiday. I remember all of this with shame from my childhood when you couldn't go on school holidays. It was very clear who was rich and who was poor. They already know because of the trainers, who's got the best trainers. So I just think as long as it's done sensitively and everybody gets the same food, but some parents are paying, if you see what I mean, then that could work.
This is, though, an expansion of the role of the state, isn't it? And some would say it sets a precedent, Emma. I know I'll get emails from viewers and listeners, because we've debated this in the past, who will say that they've struggled in the past financially, still managed to feed their kids.
This is a very, very difficult moment. It's expanding it for a year during which we know that at best, inflation's going to go down to, 8%, 6%. That's still very high for a lot of people. We're not just talking about people who are on benefits. People who are in work are struggling a great deal.
Using food banks.
And I think Reem said something quite interesting, was I don't want to throw around the word socialist. This is a socialist mayor. It says so on his Labour Party membership card. It's a socialist party. Sadiq Khan has been elected on a socialist platform. So there's nothing wrong with that.
£130 million that could be spent tackling knife crime and making London safer.
Well, knife crime has actually dropped by 13% in London, so he's clearly
too
doing... It's too high. Any percentage of knife crime is too high, but clearly there is work being done.
Yeah, you mentioned it's just for a year, and, God, families are struggling, and we don't want kids
so right
hungry
about
at
the
school.
stigma. And this is the thing, there's an awful lot of research that shows that actually having these kind of blanket policies really do help kids across the board.
That would be right, the stigma of saying, I'm the kid on free school meals, you know what kids can be like.
And we all remember what that was like.
Very cruel.
No one wants to be the kid that stands
I'm old enough to
out.
remember with national health glasses.
Yeah.
Which made you the laughing stock.
Yeah.
I'm still wearing, I'm pleased to say. Very well built.
I'm too vain to wear my glasses on the television.
You're too gorgeous. We don't want to cover any of that face. But listen, the only thing, the flip side to that is that... this is an extra burden on the state. The country's already broke. And you mentioned it's just for a year, but it would be very politically unpopular if you were to withdraw this.
Well, I wouldn't withdraw it at all. I would keep it forever, but then I'm a socialist and a very proud one.
But then earlier you just said, it's only for a year, because that's how you sell these things.
It is only for a year, absolutely. But, I think this is the year to start introducing this kind of thing.
This is the year to introduce, Reem, a big state.
There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government programme. Let's quote Ronald Reagan.
Boom, mic drop. Starting from tomorrow, it's a fascinating story, Co-op will be removing best before dates from hundreds of fresh products. But worry not, encrypted codes will be used instead to make sure that everything sold is fresh. But it does beg the question, those best before dates, are they a bit of a con? Are they a scam? Do you care about them? I ignore them. I just open the packet and smell.
Yep.
So.
It's very important to differentiate, because I had to do a food hygiene standard certificate because I volunteer to cook at a charity once a week. There is a huge difference between use by, which you really do have to pay attention to, because you will get all sorts of botulism and what have you if you don't pay attention to use by dates, and best before, which is essentially advice rather than a rule. So best before is, if you have it by this date, it will taste fresher and nicer, but you can absolutely eat it 2-3 days later.
But for example, apples are absolutely, most apples are absolutely fine
for weeks.
For 70 days after their best before.
Well, actually, if you wait 2 years, you get cider, which is even better.
Even better, exactly. And an apple that's no good, it will tell you, it will be fluffy, it will be soft, it will be rotting, whatever.
Yeah.
The levels of food waste in this country are absolutely shocking.
Shocking.
We need to use our common sense. People need to smell. I would agree with things like meat and fish, which I wouldn't go anywhere near.
Which would have used
things
by
like
dates
meat and
rather than
fish
before.
do need some indication so that people can see and know that. But if your broccoli has gone really yellow and has got bits of fluffy mould on, you know it's off. If the milk smells high, as my father used to say, you know, the sniff test.
Yeah.
Yogurt, stuff like that is absolutely fine for a week or 2 weeks afterwards.
But the point is that you can tell when you smell it, when you taste it, and you can tell as an individual, and you know what you're doing. In my family, look, we've got heaps of Egyptian food in the fridge, and none of that has a sell-by date, but we smell it, we taste it, and we know what it's like. And actually, I mean, my family, we've got a very much so, you know, waste not, want not kind of sort of principle in my family. My father would absolutely die if I ever threw away food that was perfectly good. So I think, you know, I think we've just got to be clear about that, and people, individuals, know what they're doing. I mean,
and if in doubt, give it to your 2-year-old.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Throw it away.
Is that official anyway?
Is that like the food tester to the king? You're not sure about it, so give it to the baby first, see what happens.
No, just feed it to him.
Yeah, well, the thing is, those babies are pretty hardy. I mean, I remember for our first son, we were boiling, sterilising bottles for
I did
about
that
2
for a
years.
while.
Yeah, and then we got to the second one. Someone said, wait a minute, the baby's walking around on the floor, shoving stuff in their mouth. Why are you boiling bottles?
Literally putting their mouth around lampposts where dogs have urinated all over. Exactly. Everything goes in their
I mean,
mouth.
I do wonder also, though, Reem, whether we are a little bit sort of diva-like these days, because... You know, back in the day, unless it smelt like it was going to kill you, you ate it. I understand you've got to be careful with things like shellfish, pork products. They can be pretty nasty, but beef is something that can just sit there forever. It doesn't really spoil. My grandfather used to keep butter in a cupboard.
Well, there you go. And I think that actually nowadays, potentially this is again potentially this is a sort of generational thing where a lot of people in my generation, I'm 20, tend to sort
Don't
of...
rub it in.
I know,
sorry.
Right?
tend to sort of... Mic drop 20. A lot of people in my generation tend to maybe be a little bit more spoiled when it comes to food standards. But I know that, you know, my father would say back in the day we'd eat anything as long as it smelt OK. But I think that nowadays it's actually becoming trendy to not waste food, because it's, again, sort of a woke sort of social justice warrior thing you throw out. Now there's these apps where you get to sort of get the food from shops that have been left over.
People in your generation order food in. People in your generation eat out at cafes and restaurants. When I was a teenager, you couldn't eat out. You'd go to McDonald's once a month as a treat.
Too right. The good news is that a friend of mine always says this: if you get food poisoning, just think of the weight loss.
Absolutely.
I tell you.
It's a great benefit. Silver lining.
Yeah, loving that flat tummy, let me tell you, after I've had gastroenteritis. I wouldn't recommend it. I do jest. If you're not well, go and see a GP. If you can get an appointment. Got to stop talking about it. We've got more papers next. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I've received a flood of emails in relation to my interview with Sir Bill Cash, long-standing Tory MP and, of course, Eurosceptic. Some people characterise him as the godfather of Brexit. And this from Gillian. Mark, fantastic interview with Sir Bill. Goodness gracious me, sorry. Now, somebody has, let's see, hopefully I've pinned this one. But yes, Ray. Mark, I enjoy your broadcasting. Bring back Sir Bill Cash from a viewer in Ulster. Thank you for that, Ray. Michael thinks I've been pretty tough on Prince Andrew. That was the topic of my take at 10. It looks like he's going to be evicted from his £30 million Royal Lodge mansion in Windsor because he's not going to get enough cash to maintain it. I don't think he'll be homeless, but Michael has said, Mark, you're rather unfair on the Prince. Don't forget he is a hero of the Falklands. Michael, thank you for that. We do love to balance the debate on this programme. How about this? Sell-by dates, use-by dates. Adrian, hi, Mark. My mum kept butter in the cupboard, then the fridge at night. No microwaves. Mum didn't ever cook curries or bolognese. Traditional English food. Can you even say that now? Well, on this show you can, Adrian, and lucky you. It sounds like you were well nourished in your childhood. Now, let's get to another story. Castleford Tigers player Joe Westerman was caught on camera in an alleyway behind Greggs performing a sex act on a woman. The online community, the online audience are calling for him to be sacked. The club have seen fit not to relieve him of his duties. There was an investigation, but it begs the question, should your private life affect your job? Emma, I know you love this story, so take it away.
Well, I don't know. Now, I'm just remembering milk on windowsills. Do you remember milk on windowsills? That's a classic.
The student trick of having a carrier bag with your butter and your milk hanging out the window.
But in winter, it really is. I mean, it really is cold enough.
Yeah, I remember when I was at school, milk would be gone off in the summer and fresh in the winter.
Yeah.
It was weather-related.
And also, you had a milkman then, and they would put the milk in a glass bottle on your front step, and by about 9 o'clock, it was just, burned by the rant.
Well, let's now talk about Nookie.
Okay,
so this
Nookie
guy
in the alleyway.
I don't think that he should have done this because, not from a moralistic point of view, but it's a public order offence to commit a sex act in the street.
Do we have any more details? What was he doing? It
Well,
says
we know
they
it
were
was-
on. He was on his knees, but were they
Can
both?
I just say
I
that-
think we can guess.
Well,
We all had sex education in school.
the good news is that
These two have been talking about sex all evening.
What I've actually spent the afternoon doing some sketches of what happened. I'll act them out for you.
Like your French women.
His real crime was being outside of Greggs and not in it, because it's a great shop, isn't it?
He was round the back of Greggs.
for
Why
me,
is it
I'm
always?
at that age where the real pleasure is not the alleyway
It's the
outside
pasty.
Greggs. It's in Greggs. It's the steak bake.
It's when you combine the two, Mark. That's when you really know you're having
Vegan
fun.
sausage roll.
Yeah, that would be it.
Vegan sausage roll
sorry,
afterwards.
Why disgrace Greggs like that? Seriously? I mean, it's just, I think, look, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact, with his job. I don't think that cheating on his wife necessarily negates the fact that he's probably a very good rugby player, but I think what it does do is just embarrass him. And actually, I think it's more of a cultural awareness thing. Nobody will be able to think of anything else other than that sex act outside Greggs when he's playing.
Indeed.
I think when he's playing, the players playing against him won't be distracted by what he's done. He'll be able to do his job perfectly well. I mean, I think it kind of depends on the job.
Right.
If you're a policeman, you probably shouldn't be having it away where it's illegal. But most of the time, let's just be grown-ups about this stuff. I think people have a sex life. People have enjoyable things that they do all over the blooming place. I know I do. It doesn't stop me being any good at my job in the daylight hours.
Where do you go? Is it McDonald's or is it a little bit more upmarket?
Are you more a
Cafe Rouge?
pret-a-manger kind of girl?
I think the weirdest place is a mini roundabout.
What's wrong?
Mini roundabout. What does that say about him?
He was actually 6'4", but there you go.
What's wrong with the bed?
You.
What's wrong with the bed?
Too big for
Well,
a mini
sometimes
roundabout.
you just can't wait until you get home.
So you've had an encounter on a roundabout?
Yes.
All right. Were there any crashes as it happened?
It was 2 a.m. Thankfully, there was no one else around.
What an exotic lifestyle you've got. We have seen school teachers and the like lose their jobs for having an OnlyFans account. And OnlyFans is a subscription service in which they, perhaps somebody models, maybe even nudity, maybe even sex. But what's that got to do with you being a maths teacher?
I don't think it does. And actually, look, I'm pretty socially conservative in that I think that maybe you shouldn't have an OnlyFans account if you would like to be a good role model in society, especially for women. I think the commodification of sex may be a separate conversation. However, it doesn't have anything to do with your job, and I think that actually it doesn't take away from how good of a teacher you may or may not be. So I think that, no, nothing you do outside of work should affect your role, so long as it's not sort of illegal or...
I don't know. What about those politicians that were so drunk, that regularly are so drunk that they have to be walked to their cabs and we have to tell they have to tell them the address where they go?
Crazy.
No, because I'm worried about them going into work the next day. It is actually affecting their work. Same thing with teachers who are having sex in alleyways behind Greggs or whatever you guys are all doing. I don't want them going into work to teach my child the next day, for example, when they've been up all night doing filthy things in an alleyway.
Funny enough, I'm actually a bit more worried. You raise a good point. I'm more worried about public figures, teachers, you name it, being drunk and taking drugs. But I think what you do with your loins is your business. But there you go. Very briefly, a 2019 Paddington Bear 50 pence coin could fetch you a massive £1,500. A 50p coin, Paddington Bear, worth $1.5 grand. Well, apparently people have been finding it in the back of their sofa. So it begs the question, what is the strangest thing you've found down the back of the sofa? Have you found anything good down the back of the sofa?
I found a piece of bread down the back of the sofa today. All sorts of things go down the back.
Let me guess, as an exhausted, overworked mum, you probably ate.
No, I didn't eat. I didn't eat it. It was
What was
definitely.
the best before date?
It was definitely. I find so many things down the sides of the sofas. It's really annoying me.
Really? Found any money? Found anything?
No money.
OK, well, I tell you what, let me have a quick look, see if there's anything behind the GB News sofa. I'm looking for Nigel Farage's aftershave, maybe.
Your coconut oil is down there, Mark.
Dan Wotton's hair curlers.
Your coconut oil is definitely down there.
What the heck is this?
What is that?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
No.
It's a spider. Look at that. Found that down the back of the sofa. It needs a name, so let's call it Sturgeon the Spider. There you go. Wee Nicola. Isn't she gorgeous? There you go. See, full of surprises. Oh, dear. I've just freaked them out. Arachnophobia
Fabulous.
has
Oh my God,
broken
it's
the
real.
studio.
That's amazing.
It is. It is
so cool.
It is a real spider. It's a real
I'm not happy about
crustacean.
this. Can you take it away?
And on that natural note, let me tell you,
my God.
my panel freaked out but brilliant tonight. Thank you so much to the two Emmas and Reem, and to you for your company and your emails. I'm back on Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.